Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, the trillion-dollar sports business, law, marketing, deal-making, politics, economic impact. We get behind the issues, and we focus, why wouldn't we, on two big issues this week. The Final Four, men's and women's, and Major League Baseball opening. Nationals Park, Camden Yards, everywhere else. All 30 teams are going to the World Series. This is the beauty of this week, because regardless of how many free agents you sign, everybody always points to the sneaky teams that get in when nobody predicts, and the teams that are spending money to get great, or spending money to increase expectations, or sell season tickets, or the like. And we'll talk about that after we have our interview with Rick Davis, who is an agent of significant repute on the coach's side. He's also done player stuff on most of the sides of the business, and can talk about how the one and done impacts us, what the respective free agent spending is, getting into basketball, and then coming out. We'll talk about the baseball implications of that. But first, if you want to see our 15 to watch, plus our 5 tech, plus our 5 power of sports philanthropic, look at CSN Washington, csnmidatlantic.com, all of the internet access to give you the list of the top 25 topics from the week. And also subscribe to Google Play, Audio Boom, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, all of those places where podcasts are sold, and we can talk about all of these specifics as well. Before we get into Rick Davis, let's talk about the Final Four and set the stage. Cinderella story, Loyola Chicago, Michigan on one side of the bracket. Yeah, that left side of the bracket nobody had. The right side, chalk. As a Duke fan, I don't like chalk, but at least we understand it's 1 and 1 seed against each other, and the winners on the other side, Loyola Chicago, and let's see what happens as far as Michigan is concerned as well. VCU, George Mason, LSU, all 11 seeds. See how Loyola does. Overtime, Final Four, Duke, Kansas. We don't have to worry about that, lest you think Loyola's sister Jean's coaching abilities are pure nonsense. The former player and coach has been a Chicago sports hero for half a century. As the London's Guardian noted, an unconventional tournament demands an unconventional hero. But let's talk about the boardroom. Upwards of 30 million, let's say times 10, 300 million. That's the economic impact of the Final Four on its host city over the past few years. Phoenix, regional impact of $324 million last year's Final Four. Arizona State University, W.P. Carey School of Business. Out-of-town spending. These are not people who would come otherwise. These are out-of-towners. Average visitors stayed slightly more than 4 days, nearly $500 a day. About $11.7 million in tax revenue, split between area cities, Maricopa County, and the state of Arizona. The year before, third time the tournament's 78-year history, in the Space City hosted the Final Four. $300 million in revenue in Houston. Helped taxpayers feel better about the $8 million subsidy provided by the state of Texas. San Antonio, aided by rabid Loyola Chicago fans who haven't seen their team advance since 1963, should reach the $300 million benchmark easily. It also doesn't hurt, by the way, that the 4 semifinal teams all hail from areas mostly covered by ice, snow. Can't even see them because ice and snow is so thick. How about on the women's side? Well, obviously important as well, but when you think about the perspective of it, overall attendance for the first 2 rounds reached its highest mark in a decade. 5,000 fans or so per game through the first 48 contests. The regional contests had similarly strong numbers. Some of the biggest teams in the country sold thousands of tickets many days in advance of the games actually taking place. New teams in Mississippi State and South Carolina, for example, attracting more than 10,000 people per game was the goal of Notre Dame coach Muffet McGraw. South Carolina drew really well as well. Their opening round against North Carolina A&T, over 11,000 fans. Sunday's winners, Mississippi State and Louisville, played the winners of Monday's Elite 8 matchups between UConn and South Carolina, Notre Dame and Oregon. Final Four in Columbus, Ohio on Friday. Looking at the economics of ad rates on the men's and women's side, they're grounded by fan avidity. That's a newfangled way of saying Everybody likes their colleges, and that's what happens when the ad spend growth rate for March Madness, by the way, it still trails football, basketball, pro, NBA, and baseball, but was $1.28 billion on TV ads, 3.3% record growth annually during last year's tournament, 97 advertisers. The tournament, again, 3.3% since topping the billion for the first time in 2012. And for comparison purposes, the NFL nearly 10% growth and the NBA 11%. But the high cost of advertising during the tournament for a month relative to global audience size, likely the biggest reason March Madness's spend growth rate trails pro basketball, football, and baseball. But don't tell that to the avid fans of schools. And look at how corporations activate. Reese's in the NCAA celebrating 10 years of the brand's partnership in March Madness. Activations have included Reese's Final Four Friday, National Association of College Basketball Coaches All-Star Game. This year, Reese's will hit Final Four weekend by continuing its support of the U.S. military through a community event in partnership with the Wounded Warrior Project. David the Admiral Robinson and Reese's NABC College All-Star Game players will distribute 200 Easter baskets to veterans and their families. Reese's Final Four Friday on March 30. Fans can experience entertainment throughout the day, including during the Final Four team practices, the Reese's NABC College All-Star Game, and other experiences. This partnership gives the Sweet 16 its just desserts. How about that? Well, we also have to talk about off-the-court stuff. We'll continue to talk about it every week, but it doesn't dominate, but it clearly has to be mentioned. Recommendations for reform in college basketball. The Big East proposed replacing the current one-and-done rule with a two-or-none policy. The conference's recommendations follow those put forth by the Pac-12, calling for similar changes to be made immediately in college basketball in the wake of that FBI probe. The Big East two-or-done rule would mean a player would either have to commit to playing at least 2 years of college basketball at the minimum, or else have a high school player declare for the NBA draft and forfeit future college eligibility. Additionally, the Big East had put forth the idea to create an elite player unit, EPU, who would concentrate on providing guidance to players with serious and legitimate NBA aspirations. The recommendations went to former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who's leading the NCAA Commission on College Basketball. Any recommendations that under Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman's signature will merit serious consideration. And looking at the big picture, it's worth noting bankruptcies NBA players experienced over the past years. Allen Iverson, Antoine Walker, Latrell Sprewell, Eddie Curry, Derek Coleman, Eric Williams, Darius Miles, Kenny Anderson. While not all of these players were one and done, they clearly could have gotten more either out of their time in college or stockpiling wealth in the NBA. We talk about the protection of financial investment. We talk about free agency. We talk about how agents deal with all of this. Rick Davis, Wallace Jordan, Ratliff and Brandt partner, Birmingham, Alabama. He clearly has been involved in all of these areas. He's been part of the Bear Bryant scholarship tree, captain, co-captain, University of Alabama, Sylvester Croom, and he captained the 1974 team. Ray Perkins was involved with his original organization with a co-agent, Bill Fraley, from 1983, and beyond 35 individuals. He also was involved originally in the drafting of the Alabama Athletes Agents Responsibility Act. And he played under Coach McKay with the Tampa Bay Bucks, the author of that famous "I'm all for players' execution" line after Rick Davis was single-handedly responsible for that team going 0-14. Not single-handedly, but look, he's been through it all. Rick's a good friend, but he also can give us some very interesting perspective on the business of agency, college and pro football, basketball, and coming out of this interview, baseball.
Sports professor Rick Horrow in the boardroom, keeping score. I am proud and honored to have a venerable lawyer who has done it all. He was a co-captain of the 1974 Alabama team with Sylvester Croom. He was recruited and given a scholarship by Bear Bryant. He started a sports business agency practice with William Fraley, having Ray Perkins as the first client in 1983, which is 35 years ago, back in the Ice Age. He was part of the John McKay, Can We Execute All of the Players? He'll tell the story. Tampa Bay Buccaneers is one of the slowest safeties in the history. Line after that intro. How was that?
That was great, Rick. I appreciate all those great compliments.
Yeah, they were. Backhanded as they might have been.
That's right.
So the reason why we're doing this today is that free agency has skyrocketed in both football and baseball, and I can't think of anybody to kind of comment on the business than somebody who's as well-rounded. In all seriousness, you've covered the waterfront. So kind of tell us why, you graduated, obviously, and could have done anything with your law degree. You ended up wanting to work with players and coaches and got Ray Perkins in 83, and then you're now with Wallace, Jordan, Ratliff, and Brandt, and the rest is history. So kind of fill us in.
Well, Rick, I played at Alabama. I played football at Alabama with Coach Bryant. Then I played 4 years in the NFL. While I was at Alabama, Robert Fraley and we were teammates at Alabama, and I don't know if some people might remember Robert represented Payne Stewart, a professional golfer, and he and Payne were on the plane that crashed several years ago. So that's how Robert and I had talked about, both going to law school and coming out and practicing together when we were at Alabama, playing at Alabama. And so while I was playing in the NFL, he went to law school, got out, and he was practicing, and he kept encouraging me when I got cut after my fourth year in the league and decided to go back to law school. So got out of law school, and Robert and I moved from Birmingham to Orlando, Florida, and we worked out of his house for about 4 or 5 months while we built our office. And Ray Perkins, Coach Bryant, had retired after the 1982 season, and Ray was with the New York Giants, and Coach Bryant and Ray played at Alabama. Coach Bryant hired him to come in as the head football coach, and then Coach Bryant passed away early in 1983, and Ray became the athletic director. And Robert and I got an audience with Ray. We convinced him that he'd be better off having 2 former Alabama players represent him than a lawyer out of California. And we had no idea what we were doing, but we sold it to him. And so that's how we got started in the business.
Well, that's an admission that's not really true, because you've always known what you've been doing, and you're very studious, and compliments will come sparingly. But I'm very serious about that. So your perspective now at Wallace Jordan, what's kind of your practice today? Primarily
coaches. I used to represent players, but just about 20 years ago, a lot of the stuff that you see going on with college basketball, a lot of the issues that are happening there, I started seeing that more and more, where to have a chance with some players, you had to do things that were against the rules, and we just didn't do that and don't do that. And so I just made the decision about 20 years ago just to represent coaches. And so that's what I primarily do, is represent coaches, mostly football, but several basketball coaches. And I enjoy it, just like talking salaries and all those kind of things. It's just things have really changed a lot. Coach Bowden, Bobby Bowden, was and is a client of ours, and I've represented Coach Bowden, and he was the first college football coach to make $1 million a year back in 1995. And now if you got coordinators, college football offensive and defensive coordinators making $2 million a year. So it's all changed tremendously in the last 20 years.
So not only coaches, but Bobby Bowden, Chan Gailey, Sylvester Croom, guys who have risen to the pinnacle of their profession. We'll get into the salary issue this way. When you represent a coach, do you get a feeling it's a separate kind of negotiation than it would have been representing a player? I know there are caps on players and not on coaches. Do you feel it's kind of a zero-sum game? If a coach gets $1, a player is less likely to get $1. Is there competition there, or is it totally separate?
No, I think it's separate, Rick. I don't think that you look at what's happened with free agency in the NFL, and you look at Major League Baseball and the salaries there. I don't think what players are making really has any effect on what coaches are getting paid, and so I don't think there is a difference when you see a guy like Drew Brees he just signs a 2-year deal and he's making $50 million over those 2 years. Then you look at baseball with Mike Trout, he's making $34 million a year, and Clayton Kershaw's $33 million a year. Then you go over to the coaches, and Jimbo Fisher signs a 10-year deal at Texas A&M for $75 million. Coach Saban at Alabama, he's averaging he's an 8-year deal for $65 million. Last year he made a little over $11 million because $4 million of that was a signing bonus. So, but I think as far as professionally, I think what they're paying, what players are getting, doesn't have any impact on what the professional coaches are making. And as we know, in college, the players don't get quote paid, but the revenues that are generated by both college programs and NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, I just think those numbers, as you know, continue to go higher and higher because of television and other areas.
We've got a lot of kind of don't get quote paid questions, but before we get into that, let's talk about the football free agency side. We're run this week after the heels of the Vikings basically spreading their quarterbacks throughout the league, and it's hard to believe that the Viking tree last year will now maybe feed 3 starting quarterbacks plus getting Case Keenum for themselves. The whole world of free agency in the NFL, give us some general tips on where you think it is and what the trend is.
Well, when I played, my rookie year, Rick, was 1975, and I had an $8,000 signing bonus, $4,000 more when I made the team, and my base salary was $18,000.
Well, time out, and I've seen you run, and that was too much. Way too much.
Thanks. Well, it was a different game.
It was a different game. By the way, before we continue, so you got cut from a team that was 0-17, 0-14 the previous year, is that correct?
You talking about in Tampa the next year? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But we were 0-14 regular season, 0-6 in preseason, so we lost 20 games.
Tell the story quickly, the McKay execution. Coach
McKay, I was one of the few players probably in the history of the NFL that got drafted twice. I was drafted by Cincinnati out of Alabama, and then they had the expansion allocation draft the next year. There were some other guys but each team got to protect about 25 or 27 players of a 40-man roster, and so I had called Coach Bryant and asked him to call Coach McKay. They were buddies, and so I thought I'd have a better chance to play in Tampa than special teams, which I was playing in Cincinnati. So I ended up in Tampa Bay. Coach McKay was completely different than Coach Bryant, just the way his personality and things. But the big joke, one of the big jokes was, Coach McKay's talking to the media after a game, and they said, "Coach, what do you think about your team's execution?" And Coach McKay's response was, "I'm all in favor of that." And
maybe the best line in the history of football. And let's just remember, folks, that this is the guy that I'm talking to. You were the free safety, so you have to be quicker.
Yeah, he was smarter.
He was the last line of defense on a team that went 0-20, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just remind you that. Let's quickly get back to where we ought to be, which is free agency. You were talking about the differences between kind of 35 years ago and more, and today as far as free agency is concerned.
Well, back when I was playing, we didn't know. Nobody knew what anybody else was making. The Players Association didn't have much power. No one had any salary information of what anybody else was making. You could have had a guy sitting on the bench that was making more than a starter. But the Players Association has helped because now everybody knows what everybody's making, and the Players Association has taken a more active role. Really, college players, after they're drafted, your first contract, they don't really even need an agent or an attorney to represent them because those numbers are predetermined year by year under the new collective collective bargaining agreement. But the salary cap, the 2018 NFL salary cap is $177 million. I mean, minimum salary for a rookie in the NFL in 2018 is $480,000. But as far as, like Drew Brees, the money that he got, Kirk Cousins signs a 3-year deal for $84 million, and it's all guaranteed. And is Kirk Cousins, and I follow the NFL not that closely because I don't represent players. I represent a few coaches. But, is Kirk Cousins, does his background really warrant giving a guy, $28 million a year? Maybe so. Jimmy Garoppolo, who, goes to San Francisco, he signs a 5-year deal for $137.5 million. And so, but hey, it's the market right now. Teams need a quarterback, and then you start. The quarterbacks are usually the first ones that go somewhere, and then now you see offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, other players who are moving from team to team. But free agency is, unfortunately, a lot of guys never get to free agency in the NFL. You have a handful of players that play that long, but still, it kind of gets back to average career for an NFL player is probably 3.5 years. But,
let's just talk now general baseball. So you don't represent baseball players or coaches, but you're a student of the industry. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me the big difference is that the baseball deals are more backloaded and basically more guaranteed in a sport that is less violent than football. How does that happen?
That's right. Well, I think, again, it's because, like you said, football, the teams, they're smart. I mean, the owners of the teams they're smart, and they say, why should we guarantee a guy, for a 5-year contract where if he blows out his knee or if it's a quarterback and he, separates his shoulder or tears his arm up and he can't throw the ball anymore, then why should we guarantee the full 5 years? So they only do that. Kirk Cousins, his deal is fully guaranteed, which is a great deal. But it is. Football is more violent. I think players are more likely to. Your average career, like I said, was about 3.5 years, and so baseball is not as violent. Players have longer careers, and I think the Players Association in Major League Baseball has done over the course of history a lot better job for their players than the NFL Players Association has done. I think the NFL Players Association is doing better. I think they've improved things, and that's why I think you're starting now to see just the numbers. And a lot of it gets back, as you know, Rick. I mean, television revenue, the TV contracts are just continue to go up and up. And my question is, how long can that continue?
Well, and I guess that leads to kind of a almost final question for you, which is, does the luxury tax constrain the long-term mega guaranteed free agent contracts in baseball more than the salary cap does in football, or is it both kind of completely separate devices?
Well, I think they're both mechanisms that are in place, in the NFL and Major League Baseball to kind of keep things from just going just absolutely crazy. And again, with all the things and hey, I'm all in favor of coaches. I mean, you got a coordinator at LSU, the defensive coordinator is making $2.5 million a year, the coordinator, and I'm all for that. But at some point, you just got to kind of, especially college, and again, I deal more with college than I do in the NFL or Major League Baseball. But I just think at some point you just kind of step back, and I'm all for the coaches getting paid because their lifestyles they have very little family life at all because of the hours that they put in, more so in college than the NFL. But for a coordinator to be making $2.5 million a year, Dave Aranda at LSU has a 4-year, $10 million contract, which only 20 years ago or so, again, kind of getting back to Coach Bowden in 1995, being the first guy to make $1 million, a head coach, and now you got a coordinator making $2.5 million a year for 4 years. It's but hey, the money is there. The money's colleges are generating huge money for their football, basketball programs. It is. It's kind of like, how long can this go on? That's the big question.
Well, yeah, and let's also remember from our perspective, and we're old enough to say this, that we could have said the same thing. How long will this go on? When Messersmith was granted free agency in baseball in the first place,
right.
And that was 1977, ladies and gentlemen. So we're both old, but we both have some perspective. My final question for Rick Davis is: I know your family and your daughters are amazing, but if you had a son and you're not a Todd Marinovich father, and you could put a baseball or a football in his left hand, which one would it be?
Baseball. Yeah, baseball.
Yeah.
I played baseball in high school and played American Legion, played with Butch Hobson, who ended up being the manager of the Boston Red Sox, had a great career, and I think I was a decent baseball player. But where I grew up, growing up in Alabama, an hour from Tuscaloosa, Coach Bryant was the coach. The only thing I could have done either, but back then I chose football. And but today, with football being the sport that it is, and all the issues surrounding concussions and health of players, I think you can have, if you're good, I think it's maybe harder to get to the big leagues in baseball than it is in the NFL. But I think I would go baseball.
Word of the wise, ladies and gentlemen. Rick Davis, it is always a pleasure, and the Rick Davis tennis camp of him fielding drop shots is available on YouTube and Facebook. It is not pretty, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard, keeping score. See you soon.
Rick Davis has some interesting perspectives, and obviously the new baseball season upon us. All over the place. Washington, everywhere else. How about Baltimore? The Orioles trying something new to get people into their ballpark. The Orioles' new Kids Cheer Free initiative gives adults 2 free Upper Deck tickets for kids under 9 and under with the purchase of every regular priced Upper Deck ticket. A year after the club finished 23rd in attendance with their lowest per-game total in the last few years, the Orioles decided to change things up a bit. Good for them. Upper Deck tickets cost anywhere from $15 to $35, so it's not the most expensive seats in the house, but it is a great effort. The Diamondbacks have offered a similar deal for at least one series over the past few years. The Orioles become the first team to offer this for an entire season. As offer opening day unfolds this week, the move welcomed by MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, whose mission since 2015 has been to increase the participation in youth baseball and kids' interest in the big leagues. And attendance may be an issue. Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, Miami, rebuilding. Toronto, and maybe to some extent Washington, coming off a 2017 disappointment. Honeymoon waning at SunTrust Park in Atlanta, and not as many high-priced free agencies going places. Fewer than 73 million people attended MLB games in 2017. The league will do something about it, and frankly, the bottom line is if you build stadiums, they will come, at least for a few years, but you better win after that. It's not just winning, but it's generating awareness. Facebook cuts a deal with Major League Baseball, giving them the exclusive rights to stream 25 weekday games over the course of 18. Facebook Watch. Not all of the 25 games have been announced, but the Cardinals and Brewers on April 11 selected as one of them. With the live stream games, there's no traditional telecasts, and the bottom line is the first time a Cardinals game in nearly a decade hasn't been on TV in St. Louis. And while the trend will surely be welcomed by millennials and those with Facebook accounts, the shift to online streaming has the potential to cause some commotion among the more traditional crowds. Again, we'll see how that all shakes out. The other issue, as far as baseball is concerned, is always philanthropy, and it's always significant. 2 of the biggest markets in the country have taken the lead. The Yankees, David Robertson's charity High Sox for Hope, active as ever in the last few years. Meaningful mission came this past season. He set up a fundraiser for Daniel Webb, a former White Sox teammate who tragically passed away in an ATV accident last October. Losing Daniel was really tough, I didn't play with him for long, but he left a lasting memory. Webb, who was 28, left behind a wife and a new baby. And even though Daniel's major league time will ensure families some benefits, so much more they needed. Tough for his wife, also hurt in the accident, and the new baby. And Robertson said they just needed some help. We were asked to try to help them out, and we did everything we could to help raise funds to get Mel back on her feet. High Socks for Hope also helped many outside the public eye over the past years. David and his wife Erin founded the organization in 2011 to raise money for tornado victims in his hometown of Tuscaloosa, after they raised money for causes ranging from disaster relief to Veterans Affairs to purchasing beds for the underprivileged. Kudos, and good for them. Good for her, good for him. Let's go to the other side of the country. The Dodgers are selling Kirk Gibson home run seats for Parkinson Research. On opening day, the Dodgers gave fans the opportunity to sit in the Kirk Gibson seat. There's only one. His home run landed there after winning Game 1 in '88, the World Series. 302, section row D, seat 1. Though, like Gibson, the Dodgers have renumbered that seat 88. The seat will be painted blue and signed by Gibson, which makes it stand out. The seat can only be purchased in a pair, and while in many cases the seat right next to it is available, that might not always be the case. The pair of seats in the all-you-can-eat pavilion in right field, normally $45 each, and a commemorative T-shirt, plus that, sold for $300. $200 going to the Kirk Gibson Foundation to raise money to combat Parkinson's, which Gibson was diagnosed with in 2015. I'm on a mission to do what I can to help many people who are trying to find a cure for the disease, trying to help people understand what they can do to remain fairly symptom-free. Any funds I can raise to speed up efforts by many organizations for good positive markers, I'm very interested in that. Well, God bless Kirk Gibson, and God bless the Dodgers for helping as well. Let's go to football for just a second. The bottom line with the NFL is we go to Vegas. $1.8 billion venue featuring the below ground level bowl, 9 club areas, the field 20 feet below ground level. Some people walk up, some people walk down. The folding lanai doors north facing, and it's not an open air, but it gives the opportunity to open if the Vegas weather is good. 8,000 premium seats. And the project marks the next new thing the NFL stadium is trying to do to outdo its predecessors, which is to say it's no easy task because of Atlanta's Mercedes-Benz and Minnesota's U.S. Bank. They get better and better and better. And how about this? The Panthers' bid is upwards of $2.5 billion. Fanatics founder and executive chair Michael Rubin drops out. He had the financial backing of Alibaba executive chair Joe Tsai, but that wasn't enough to warrant paying the incredible sum of money. Rubin was willing to pay more than his initial bid, but only interested in paying what he deemed near to be the right price. Still, at least 4 serious bidders are in the mix, according to published reports. Bedrock Industries CEO Alan Kestenbaum, Steelers investor David Tepper, Sherman Financial Group and founder CEO Ben Navarro, all interested, and North Carolina-based SAS Institute CEO Jim Goodnight, also in the mix. $2.5 billion, now the going rate for an NFL franchise. The league will soon be forced to recognize that its long-standing family and small investor group ownership structure would need to expand. If that means getting the prices even higher, so be it. Watch for the change. Finally, let's end with soccer, and let's end internationally. The Galaxy officially signs former Man U forward and Swedish national Zlatan Ibrahimovic, marking the first and biggest MLS signing since Beckham years ago. He's 36, close to the end of his career, but he's pretty popular. And getting Zlatan, the man, the myth, the legend, is big. The Galaxy also finished the season with the league's worst record, so it certainly doesn't hurt. The battle for Los Angeles continues. The time between veteran Galaxy and MLS newbie Los Angeles FC, it is a great battle, and everybody is a winner in the process. Not so fast in Miami. Beckham and his new MLS ownership group still trying to find a site. Miami Beckham United Ownership Group reopened its search for multiple locations, a 25,000-seat soccer stadium somewhere other than Overtown on the plate. One obstacle the group faces is crunch time. Public speculation is the team will get a stadium ballot measure crafted and approved to meet an April deadline, a few months before the city's primary election in August. Potential site options include one near Jackson Memorial Hospital and another near the Mel Reese Golf Course, neither of which, by the way, presents a smooth path. But that's Miami. Finally, a stadium not in Miami, but Manchester. Old Trafford, one of the most recognizable places in the world. They're too quiet. Coach Jose Mourinho says that the capacity of nearly 75,000 is too quiet. The manager's comments have since pushed the club to find a solution to, for example, handing out song sheets at the turnstiles to every fan who enters the grounds. It remains unlikely this will actually happen, though Man U did say it would look into the idea. And parts of the stands at Old Trafford have recently been combined and designated as the singing section, which will be tested out during was tested out during a recent FA Cup home match against Brighton. And despite being considered a success by some supporters, others weren't happy because they were relocated far away from their traditional areas. And in the uber-traditional world of European soccer, singing club songs remains a charming tradition and one of the few non-football activities fully braced by fans on the grounds. And by the way, we don't count drinking, streaking, or fighting as one of those charming activities, but it would be a real shame if this great tradition slowly ebbed away. Well, that's it for Beyond the Scoreboard today. Baseball opens, Final Four closes. Next week, we look at the Masters. We look at baseball's first week. We look at other retrospective economic impact in San Antonio and beyond. We'd like to thank Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins for putting this together, and our friend Rick Davis for giving us perspective on sports agency in all contexts. We'd like to thank you for listening, and once again, join us next week when we go Beyond the Scoreboard.